Hi everybody, Chris Masto here with another Illustrator Glowforge tip on editing a file or getting a particular effect to work. I want to thank Tim1724 from the Glowforge community forum for donating this file with the problem that we're trying to fix here. In this case, this was done originally with Affinity Designer, which is a really nice program, certainly a lot more affordable than Illustrator, and unfortunately it produced a file that has a couple of glitches in here that I did try to fix this in Affinity Designer first, because ideally I'd like to show how to do that in that program. But as far as I've been able to tell, it doesn't have this equivalent functionality, or at least if it does, it's somewhere else. The things that have the same names as what I'm going to show you in Illustrator don't seem to do the same thing in Affinity Designer, so it'd be cool if somebody figures out how to solve that there. But in the meantime, let's just get into this. Now, the main issue we're talking about here today is clip paths or clipping paths or clip masks. There is a feature in these drawing programs that allows you to use a shape to clip out part of what's behind it and basically make like a window where you only show through the parts that are in that shape. And so that's what was used in Affinity Designer. The way the clipping path works is, as you can kind of see here as I run this mouse over here, there are a bunch of diagonal lines, but you can't see the diagonal lines except the part here that's being exposed, because they're masked by the shape of this text and this logo here. There's obviously an issue going on with some of the letters, but that's a separate issue from the one that we're really talking about here, which is the problem is, even if this was working correctly, the Glowforge app doesn't support clip paths. So primarily, like, you can use a clip path as a technique in making a design, and if you do that, when you go over to the Glowforge and you upload it, and let's just go and put this one in and see what happens. When you upload a design that's made using a clip path or clip mask, you get a warning that tells you that they can't process it, and then essentially what you get is the file without the clip path. So all of these lines here you see show up as an operation, the diagonal lines, and then the mask shows up as well, and so you can't actually get the effect that the author wanted here by using clip path. So you have to do the equivalent to what they wanted to produce, but do it without using clip path as the technique. Okay, so what I'm going to demonstrate here is how to take this file, kind of undo the clip path that we have, and then redo it with a different technique that will allow it to work with the Glowforge. So as I've demonstrated previously, when I'm fixing up things like this, I prefer not to work in the original file. So you can see I've opened this HMC tilelines.svg directly in Illustrator. Now, if I start manipulating it in here, that's probably fine, but for whatever reason, perhaps it's my own personal voodoo, but I would prefer to, so I'm doing Control-A, select all, copy, and then I'm going to make a new file. And I'm going to make a new file with my Glowforge template, because I prefer to work in my preferred document setup here. And then I'm just going to paste that in. So it's the same thing, except now, now I've got my panels the way I want them. I've got my swatches and things we've talked about in previous videos. Everything's kind of set up the way that I would prefer to work. Okay, so let me zoom in here a little bit and we'll just get started on this file. The first thing I would do in a situation like this is start exploring the file a little bit, understand the structure and what's going on, and primarily do that by expanding all these layers and groups, because there's a bunch of stuff going on here, and I want to be able to make sense of it. So one way to do that is to just start hiding and showing things and kind of get the idea of what's what. So the first thing that's apparent here is there's a group here. I'm going to keep hiding and showing this group so it flashes while I'm talking here. So this group here consists of just this red box around the whole thing. So that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not part of the thing that we're working with right now. So I'm just going to hide that, and we'll leave it hidden for the rest of this video since it's completely irrelevant to what we're working on. And then the rest of the thing is all within one group here. What I would consider unnecessary extraneous grouping, but I'm not going to go out of my way to clean that up. It's not really important. So now we have three things in here. One is what appears to be the actual drawing. So if I hide the other parts, this is one compound path that consists of the rounded rectangle around the outside and the text on the inside. So that's essentially the whole thing, which is good. We know we've got that. Whoops, I accidentally hid the wrong one. And then the other parts here is we have this set of clipped lines. And then we have a third thing down here, which isn't doing anything when I hide and show it. It turns out that this is another copy of the design. So this thing is kind of identical to this thing, except that this thing down here at the bottom has no fill and no stroke. So if I set the stroke here to black, you can see what that looks like. That's exactly the same as this. So these two, there are just two duplicate compound paths here. So let's make our lives easier. The first thing I would tend to do in a file like this is just clean it up. So there's no reason to have a duplicate. So I'm just going to delete that entirely. So now we've got the one path here, and then we've got this set of lines that are, again, clipped. So for the moment, let's focus on our clip group, and I'm going to hide the compound path with the logo in it. And so expanding the clip group here, we can see a couple things going on. So this is obviously the clip. I'm going to make this even wider so we can just see the words. So where it says compound clipping path here, this is the thing, this is the mask that's hiding the parts of the lines that we don't want to see. And then this other part is the lines themselves. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is select this clip group, because we cannot use a clip path, or Illustrator calls it a clip mask. So the terminology is a little confusing, but it's all the same thing. So a clipping mask in Illustrator, I'm going to select that, and I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Mask, Release, and we'll just basically undo the clipping mask, make it go away, and now we can see the file without the clipping mask. So what we need to do is recreate that look that's desired, which is having the lines just in between the outer border here and the letters themselves, without using the clipping mask feature. So to do that, I'm now looking at this, and I'm realizing that when we released that, what we got was a compound. Here, let me hide the lines again. It can be very confusing in these files to understand what's going on. But we got a compound path at the bottom here, and then we've got this other compound path, which is the one I hid. So that's the drawing there, and then this is also the same thing. You can see, again, it has no fill or stroke, but if I turn the stroke to black, you'll see that this and this are the same thing. So releasing the clipping mask in Illustrator releases that as another object, another compound path. So again, we've got duplicates, and just to clean things up, I'm going to delete the one up here. And so now this is what I consider kind of a nice cleaned up file. Everything in here makes sense, and everything in here is for a reason. There's the red border that we don't care about, there are the lines, and then there's the I'm going to call it the logo. So now we can get into how to actually perform the surgery that we want to perform here. And in order to do that, I'm going to take a little detour, and I'm just going to show a simplified version of what we're going to do. And hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier to understand. So I've hidden everything except these diagonal lines. Okay, and let's just say that we wanted to do essentially the same idea in the original drawing. So I'm going to draw a circle, and just to make it easier to see what's going on, I'm going to pick another color for the circle, make it red. Okay, and let me just draw a circle here. I'm going to hold down my Alt key so that I'm doing a center diameter circle rather than drawing it sort of corner to corner. And hold down the shift key so that it's a circle. Not that it matters. These shapes are completely irrelevant. I'm just trying to do it my way because I feel like it. And then let's just do the simplest possible thing. Okay, say I want to have it so that these lines only show up inside of that circle. Very easy to do. I'm just going to select the path with the lines. Select the path with the lines. The group, sorry, with the lines, and then shift select the ellipse here that I made. So those two things are selected, and then now you see your Pathfinder tools. You may have to, depending on how you've got everything arranged, you might have to go to Window, Pathfinder, or if you're using the new Illustrator with the Properties tab, it will guess that you're interested in Pathfinder and show that for you. Although the thing we're interested in is hidden in this 3 dots menu. So I wanted to show that just because you can expand the things you see here to get to the one that we're really interested in, which is Divide. So if I click Pathfinder Divide, then what it'll do is it'll clip those lines. And the interesting thing about that is that clicking that does not immediately take effect. So you kind of have to click outside of it or deselect it or hit enter. And so now what it's done, if I deselect everything, it'll be a little more clear. Two important things have happened here. First of all, those lines were divided by this circle, right? And we've only kept the inside part of those lines. And the second thing that's important to recognize is that they have all turned red. So I would say maybe there are 3 points to keep in mind. I'm going to undo this and just do it again so we can be really clear about this. The lines originally, we have black lines, we have a red circle. Notice that the black lines are below, this is the group with the black lines, they are below the red circle, as you can see in the layers list here. Literally, this is up here and this is down here. So this means that the circle is above the lines. So when I select both of those and I click Pathfinder Divide, hidden in the More Options button, it cuts the lines. Again, I have to hit enter here to sort of finish this. Cuts the lines and it turns them red. So you have to keep track of those 3 things. The layers, the order that the things are in the layers, what's the inside and what's the outside, and what the fill and stroke are. And that's going to affect the final result that you get. So if this doesn't do what you want, think about those things. What order are they in the stack? What's considered the inside of the thing you're dividing with, and what the fill and stroke are. All right. So now this gets into the next part. So in the logo cutout thing that we're doing, it's not a simple exterior shape. There's actually a complex thing going on here with this path, right? There are insides and outsides of these letters. So let's just do something with an inside and an outside. The way I'm going to do that is just by drawing another circle. So again, I'm going to hold down Alt and Shift, and we'll just make kind of a donut shape here. Again, purely for the purpose of illustration. So let's say now that we wanted to just keep the parts of the lines that are in between these 2 circles in this sort of donut shape. Well, what we need is something where essentially the inside is just the donut. That's not what we have here. We have a circle whose inside, I'll use the fill to show you what I mean. There's a circle whose inside is that, and there's a different circle whose inside is the whole thing. Now, how do we get one circle or one donut shape? Again, pretty easy to do with Pathfinders in Illustrator. So since we're talking about Pathfinders all day, let's do that. I'm going to select the one circle and select the other one, Shift Select. I'm leaving the outside one filled just to make this easier to see what's going on, okay? And keep in mind here, again, the smaller circle is on top of the larger circle. Always best to have sort of the thing that you're using to punch stuff out on top of the one that you're punching it out of. And in this case, we're going to use a much simpler Pathfinder here, the minus front. So minus front kind of does what it says on the tin. It takes 2 shapes and it subtracts the one that's in front of the other one. So if I click this, it's going to take that circle on the outside, and it's going to minus the thing in front of it, which is the circle on the inside, and it's going to produce a new compound shape. So this is just one compound path, and it's a donut shape, as you can see. So this is exactly what we want, because by filling it, you can tell which part is considered the inside of this shape. I'll call that the inside. This inside is actually not inside the donut, if that makes any sense, for the purpose we're going to use it for. So I'm going to turn the fill off. It's important when you're doing these kind of divide things. If, again, you need the end result, as we saw before, will take the fill and stroke of the thing that's on top. We don't want this to be filled, so we want to make sure that this is not filled when we do our divide. Okay, so it's got a red stroke, it's got no fill. And do exactly the same thing I did before. Select the group of lines, shift select this now compound path donut shape, click on more options and Pathfinder Divide. And now, again, it's not quite finished. If I hit enter and deselect everything, you can see what's going on here now. We have exactly what we wanted. The lines have been trimmed so that they're inside of this donut shape. Okay, so this has basically given us what we wanted in a kind of miniature form compared to the original thing that we wanted to do, again, with this logo. So what I'm going to do now that I've demonstrated the technique is we're going to undo all of this and get back to before I started making these circles. Okay, I think this is a good spot. And now if you look at this and kind of think about what we just did a minute ago, it's essentially the same idea, right? I'm going to want to cut these lines so that they only appear in the place where we want them to appear, which we'll call it the inside of some kind of a shape. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the lines out of the way, and let's focus on, we've already got a compound path here. Wouldn't it be great if I just clicked fill and I selected blue, and then the parts that we're interested in appeared in blue? Well, fortunately, I suppose for the purpose of demonstration, that didn't work. Or at least it didn't work exactly the way we wanted it to. So it's close, but there's a problem here, as you can see, with this U and this O. Now, I don't know where that came from. I don't know why the original file was like that, but it was. So something in Affinity Designer got confused and generated a weird-looking compound path here. Never fear. This video series is all about fixing stuff like this, so I'm going to show you how we can fix this fairly easily. I just want to zoom in here so we can, I always like to make things about as big as possible to fit on the screen. Okay, so the way we'll do this here is when there's a problem with a compound path like this, for me, I would prefer to just release the path and start over. So we can do that, and there's a quick action release button here, but I'm going to go to Object, Compound Path, Release, and that will now break this compound path apart into its components, which is great because there's really nothing wrong with the components, and everything actually looks good as it is. So what I want to do is just regenerate this compound path using these objects that I released it into. Everything's selected, everything's in the right place, everything's ready to go. I don't really have to do anything except go over to Pathfinder. And in this case, the Pathfinder I'm going to use is called Exclude. So Pathfinder Exclude will essentially remove overlapping shapes. So we have kind of a background rounded rectangle, and then we have these shapes overlapping it, and then we have inside of the shapes, they have their own little overlaps. So if we click Exclude, short version is that it will just do exactly what we want. So literally all we had to do was release the path, click Pathfinder Exclude. It resulted in a group here that's got a compound path with almost everything in it, and then the little punch outs for the letters. So you could actually use this as is, but For me, I would prefer to convert this whole group to a single compound path just to make things easier and make more sense. So I'm going to go to Object, Compound Path, Make, or press Control 8. And so now we're back to having a single compound path here, except as you can see from the fill, we're no longer filling the inside of the U and the O. So this path looks in some ways geometrically similar to those circles we had before with the donut shape, in that the filled part is the part. If I show the lines again, we want to keep the part of the lines that overlaps the blue filled part of the compound path. So really, at this point, we can use exactly the same button, and we will use exactly the same button. I will just remind everybody, again, to undo that, get rid of that fill before you do this operation. Just for neatness, I want to put my cutout above the lines. Even though I've been saying that throughout the whole video, apparently it doesn't actually need to be that way, but let's just pretend that it does. Sometimes when you're teaching people something, you lie to them a little bit. If you've ever been in a physics class, you know how important that is. So I'm going to, again, select the lines, shift select the logo, and I'm going to Pathfinder Divide. And voila, at this point now, we have exactly the thing we wanted. I can turn this this red box back on just to finalize it and leave everything where it's supposed to be. And here's the design. So you can see the lines go through where they're supposed to go, but there is no clip mask or clip path involved in this. So we should be able to just, actually I haven't saved this yet, so let's just save this to give it a name. So let's call it HMC Fixed. Now, I demonstrated using export and export for screens in a previous video. It turns out that that is officially not recommended by Glowforge. They would prefer that you use Save As. And so let's just do this differently in this video for the heck of it. I'm going to, again, maybe I'll slightly deviate from that recommendation, and I'll show you Save a Copy. Save a Copy is literally the same as Save As, so I'm not, hopefully I'm not breaking any rules here by recommending the wrong thing, but the difference is that if I do Save As here, it's going to actually change the name of this file, whereas Save a Copy maintains the hmcfixed.ai as the name, and this just basically saves it as somewhere else temporarily without changing the main name of the file. Since I always want to keep my files in Illustrator format and not SVG, I'm going to use Save a Copy. All right, so I've changed the name here to hmcfixed.svg. I'm clicking Save, and this gives me an opportunity to show you the Save As SVG options, which is something I don't think I mentioned before. We need to open up more options here to get to this responsive checkbox. There's been a lot of talk about this. This is responsive is not your friend. If you do that, then you can lose the sizes of things in the file. We don't want that. And the other thing that I think is worth changing, well, images need to be embedded. So I guess I should go down from the top. Fonts, convert to outline, image location, embed. See how most of these defaults were wrong. CSS properties, I would set that to presentation attributes. This is not for the Glowforge's benefit. This is in case you upload your file to the Glowforge forum. There is an issue with the discourse software that they use, where if you have this set to is it style attributes or style? Anyway, if you have some of these options will cause it not to work correctly. So presentation attributes is known to work. Decimal places should be 3, and responsive should be unchecked. So that's a lot to fiddle with in this dialog, but if you set it up this way, you will probably have the least amount of unhappiness. So I click OK, I save my file, and now let me go over to the Glowforge interface and upload the file I just saved, hmcfixed.svg, and see what it looks like. Okay, so here's the file in the Glowforge interface, And as you can see, it's exactly what we wanted. There are two operations. One of them is the just this series of lines as we wanted, and the other one is the box around the outside because that was in a different color. So you could easily change this from cut to engrave, or sorry, score is probably what we wanted. You can change that from cut to score, and do a nice vector score of that design, and then, I don't know, cut out the outside. And so I know I took a little while to go through all of the steps, and we took a detour with some circles and things. So the steps that I actually did without all the diversions and explanation were pretty straightforward. I just loaded the file in, cleaned up a bit, removed some duplicate objects. I released the original clipping mask, and then I released the compound path that had some problems and immediately just recreated it with Pathfinder exclude. And then I used that new compound path with Pathfinder Divide to divide the lines and get the final output that we wanted. So really, if you just click the actual buttons you need to click, this probably just takes 3 to 5 minutes to do. Fairly straightforward. And of course, if you're creating an original design in Illustrator rather than cleaning something up, you can use exactly the same techniques to do these kinds of things, and you obviously won't have to go through so many steps in order to undo the things from the file the way it came in. So hopefully this is useful and helpful to someone.